Today's topic is part exchange values. So I have had this motorcycle next to me, the Vogue 500 DSX, for 16 months now, since about April 2022. And I am getting to that stage where I want a new bike, just because we're people, aren't we? We like to have a new shiny things, and motorcycles are no exception. So I inquired about part Xing this bike into a dealer. Easy way to get rid of it, no hassle, don't have people coming and going from your house complaining about every little thing. Dealer gives you a price, you accept it's a little bit less than private, and then you give your bike and you get a shiny new bike. It sounds too good to be true, doesn't it? However, when I got the price valuation for my bike, I was really surprised and disappointed. This bike in April 2022 cost $5.5 grand. The dealer valuation 16 months later was $2.5 grand if I was to part X it, and if I was to do a cash sale, it would be even less. It would be £1,800. So why has that bike gone down in value so much? We call that depreciation. I'm going to talk a little bit today about perhaps some of the reasons behind it and which brands are affected more than others. So my bike is actually quite a relatively unknown bike. It's a Vogue. It's not really that known in the UK market. I think of this particular model, they've sold about 30 since January 2020, or March 2021. So what's that? One a month? Something like that. It's very a slow seller. So I thought, oh, okay, there's not a baseline market of buyers and sellers for this bike. So, you know, I've been just being punished really for investing in a relatively unknown motorcycle. Obviously it's Chinese as well, which is a bit of a stigma. Some people don't like that, harder to sell it. So I thought, okay, well, you know, that's you know, my luck. Take the rub. It is what it is. I like the bike, but I'm going to lose a lot of money on it. And then I learnt that it's not just weird and wonderful bikes that you're getting punishing part X values. Loads of people have been mentioning on the Royal Enfield Facebook group that they're getting horrible valuations and they're keeping hold of their bikes. So for example, if you were to take a Royal Enfield Meteor, which I used to own, it was here on this channel, I paid $3,900 for that bike, and when I part X'd it for this bike, only, as I say, 18 months ago, not even that, I got £3,000 in part X. So I paid 3.9k, I got 3k back, or it might even have been 3.2k. I didn't lose a great deal percentage wise. I lost about 20%, which is actually the VAT on the bike, isn't it? So I effectively didn't really lose anything part X in the bike. It was crazy. So I thought, oh, okay, brilliant. But nowadays, if you want a part X a Royal Enfield Meteor 350, you're paying $442 because the price has gone up, and the dealer's offering people £1,500 for their bikes, or £2,000, and that is a 50-60% depreciation in 1 or 2 years, and with bikes that have only got 900, 1100, maybe 1500 tops miles on them, so they're barely running. In fact, they're not running until they're at 1200 miles for the Meteor. It's the same story with the Classic, and same story with the Hunter, though the Hunter's a little bit newer, so not as many people are getting to that stage where they're wanting to offload that particular J series bike. Okay, let's think about the Interceptor. The Interceptor is a £6 grand bike new, 6.5 depending on what version you buy, and the prices people have been given for that bike are £2.5 grand, £2 grand. So you've lost 75% of the value in 2-3 years. It's amazing, really. It's a terrible investment. So what's caused this and how is it dealt with? Well, I mean, the offer is the offer. It's up to you to accept it or not. You could then go ahead and buy a bike privately, perhaps, or sell a bike privately, and you might get more luck. But the dealer isn't going to be easily convinced to give you any more money because they've got certain overheads and profit margins to make. and they're not going to be easily convinced to give you any more money off on the new bike that you want. So let's look at some of the causes behind the brutal valuations. Well, I mean, I think we're looking in relative terms, and in the last 2 years we had an exceptional set of events with a pandemic, a global supply shortage, a semiconductor shortage, a ship that was beached in the Suez Canal that disrupted global shipping. So all of this kind of came together, and it meant basically you couldn't get a new bike, so there was huge wait times on new bikes. I actually waited 9 months to get a Royal Enfield Meteor, which sounds crazy now, but back in 2021 things were weird and the world was upside down. So that meant that you could often buy a new vehicle and then get it for, you could buy a new vehicle and then sell it at a higher price than you paid for it, even though it was now second hand. It didn't have first owner privilege anymore. I have a friend who bought a Range Rover Velar, or just Land Rover Velar, whichever way it's called. He bought it and he sold it back to the dealer for more money during that period than he actually paid for the vehicle. Another thing which comes into play is actually the price of bikes when they're new. So depending on manufacturer timelines for releasing new models, so think about the BMW 1250 GS, obviously a totally different league to my bike. They're bringing out a 1300 GS, so there's going to be an influx of 1250 GSs into the market as soon as owners trade in those bikes against the new model. So you've got to think a little bit about supply and demand when it comes to this kind of thing. With the Vosges, some weirdness and sort of business skullduggery happened with the reseller agreement, the distribution importer agreement, and Lexeter, who used to support this model here in the UK, dropped the Vosges brand, began importing their own almost identical Lex Moto branded 500cc twin entry-level adventure bike, and then the Vosges brand has now been picked up by MotoGP, who are importing it. But all this has meant that the price of these bikes has been depressed new, so obviously that affects second-hand values, because why would somebody coming into a showroom buy a second-hand bike for like £3,500 when they can buy a new one for £4,000? You might as well just pay that small differential and get a brand new to you bike. You know, you're the first owner. So the dealers know this, so they're not going to give Part X values and take on that risk without knowing they can get a profit out of it. So that's happened to Vosges. Let's talk about Royal Enfield. Now, again, it's been a switch around of distribution. MotoGP, or I just mentioned, used to import Royal Enfield, but they didn't perform up to specification. I don't know the ins and outs of it. You know, I'm not a business insider, just a sort of YouTube commentator. Parts were quite difficult to get from MotoGP. So that relationship is no longer being renewed on a yearly basis, and Royal Enfield are getting to import the bikes themselves. However, that sounds good, but MotoGP got 3,500 Royal Enfields to offload, and the way to do that is to get rid of those bikes from stock, is to slash the prices. So new bikes, if you want a new Royal Enfield, good time to buy one. The Super Meteor was 6,500. Now you can get it for close to 6 for the Astral. So they've cut the price of the Astral. Sorry, the Interstellar. It's Celestial, Astral, Interstellar, isn't it? The middle tier, that's been reduced by 500 quid. 2022 Interceptors, 850 quid off. 2023 Interceptors, 500 quid off. Meteors are 300 off. Oh, Meteors and Classics are 350 off. Hunters are 300 off. So you see what's happening, it's squishing down the price of the new bikes. I'm just going to move my camera so I'm not directly going into the sun. So the new bike prices are coming down. Again, all Royal Enfield second-hand values are going down, and obviously you don't get as much with a Part X, so you're suffering from that point of view as well. And that means if you do want to get rid of your bike, you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. I would probably suggest doing a private sale and just waiting, and don't be in a position where you need to offload a bike quickly for cash reasons. You know, don't buy something now. If you can at all predict with a cost of living crisis and everything like that, that you're going to be needing to offload it in 12 months time. And if you are someone who changes bikes regularly, maybe think about buying a bike that's got a bit more long-term value for you. Buy the one with a little bit more power, or it's got luggage, or it's comfortable, so you don't get, I feel like changing. So yeah, it's strange times to be a motorcyclist. I thought it was, I first thought it was just me, having bought into a unknown brand. But it turns out even the established brands are suffering with a surplus of bikes, basically. Manufacturing's ramped back up. It also does a little bit depend on what the dealer can easily sell. And I spoke to a couple of dealers about it, and they explained to me that Japanese bikes, for example, always sell within a week. Royal Enfields actually sell quite easily, but obviously we talked about other factors for Royal Enfield. Ducati, difficult to sell because the brand is thought to be expensive to maintain, service, ownership, insurance, all those ongoing costs of Ducati are a bit problematic. What else did they say? Oh, Benelli, difficult to sell. I don't know why, because Benelli have got like a good heritage behind them. Perhaps it's the made in China thing. Even though bikes are made all over the place these days, aren't they? Triumph's made in Thailand, Royal Enfield made in India, BSA made in India. But yeah, I think that a lot of bikes are difficult to sell. I found my bike difficult to sell. Obviously I've picked a very weird bike, but nevertheless, you've got to consider now whether you buy new, you've got to consider whether you buy something that will easily resell, whether there's a willing market of buyers and sellers waiting to take that bike off you when you do want to get rid of it. I will probably now not buy a new bike. I will buy a nearly new bike so I don't suffer from that initial drop of depreciation. Sure, if I buy a second-hand Gold Star, BSA Gold Star from a dealer, for example, which is something I'm looking at doing, I'll get, say I'm lucky and I pay 5.5 grand. If I want to part X that in, he's just going to give me 4.5 grand valuation and then instantly make that grand markup when he resells it to the next guy who comes along. But I don't think a grand is as bad as losing 60% of the value, so 3 or 4 grand. So it's about kind of playing the system a little bit, and I'm cautious of that. Also, don't forget, the more expensive bike you buy, the worse it's going to get. So I have a friend in Germany paid 26,500 euros for a BMW GS 1250 Adventure triple black edition. Dealer offered him 18, so that is a savage depreciation of 8.5 according to the dealer's value. He then sold it privately. He wanted 22 and he got, I think, 21,750, something like that. So he's looking at, what's that, almost 22, mid fours, maybe 5,000 depreciation, which is a lot in a year. Obviously he's suffering because the GS 1300 is about to come out. So, all right guys, I'm just going to end the video there. It's just a bit of a talk about what we can do as owners. If you've got any comments, then jot down below. Be interested to hear what you have to say about the great depreciation issue. All right, see you in the next one.